All right, let's jump right in. What is law, really? Is it some kind of universal moral compass, or is it just a set of rules handed down by whoever's in charge? This is one of the biggest, oldest questions out there, and today we're going to tear it apart and see what's inside. So, let's kick things off with a real bombshell. This comes from one of the most famous legal minds in American history, Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. And get this. He basically said we should take a giant eraser to the law books and get rid of any word that even smells like morality. We're talking words like good, bad, right, wrong. Just gone. I mean, that sounds completely nuts, right? A judge of all people saying we should ditch morality? Why on earth would anyone suggest that? Well, that question, that's our starting point. And to really get it, we can't just talk theory. We have to go to some pretty dark places in history where the line between law and morality got terrifyingly blurry. So to really wrap our heads around what Holmes was getting at, we have to move past the philosophy classroom. We need to look at times when the question, what is law, wasn't some fun little debate. It was literally a matter of life and death. Okay, picture this. It's post-World War II Germany. The courts are dealing with the messy aftermath, and they come across a case. A woman had turned in her own husband to the authorities during the Nazi era. Why? Because he'd said some critical things about Hitler. And here's the kicker. Technically, she was just following the law as it was written back then. So what do? I mean, the court was in a total bind. Do you punish her for something that was perfectly legal at the time she did it? Or is there some kind of higher law, a moral law, that can step in and say, nope, that state law doesn't count? The way they answered that question shaped a whole school of thought about law itself. And what they decided to do was to look past the ink on the page. They basically said, look, for something to actually count as law in the first place, it has to pass a moral test. And this, right here, is the heart of what's called natural law theory. The idea is that those Nazi statutes, they weren't just bad laws. They weren't laws at all. They were so fundamentally evil, so against any sense of basic human decency, that they just didn't qualify. So from this point of view, the woman wasn't following the law. She was taking part in a crime. Here's a good way to think about it. It's kind of like a marriage, right? The whole thing is built on a foundation of shared understanding of morality, trust, fairness. If you yank that out, the whole institution just falls apart. For a natural law theorist, law and morality are just completely intertwined. You can't have one without the other. Okay, but not everyone buys this. In fact, that idea that you can just decide an evil law isn't really a law is a huge red flag for a whole other group of thinkers. They'd say, hang on, that sounds nice, but it's a recipe for absolute chaos. And this brings us to the other side of the coin, legal positivism. Guys like John Austin champion this, and their argument is simple and, well, very direct. A law is a law, period. If it comes from the person or group in charge, the sovereign, it's valid. Whether you think it's a good law or a monstrously bad law, that's a moral debate, a totally separate conversation. So you see the clash, right? It's pretty stark. Natural law says an unjust law isn't really a law. Legal positivism says law and morality are two different things. A law can be 100% valid and also 100% evil. And believe me, this argument has been going back and forth for a very, very long time. But then, just as this debate is raging, a new group walks onto the scene. And they basically look at both sides and say, you're both wrong. In fact, you're not even asking the right question. These were the legal realists, and they just completely changed the game. They said, let's stop arguing about these lofty definitions of what law is. Let's ask a much simpler, more practical question. What does law actually do? What's its function in the real world? Forget the theory. What's happening on the ground? So a guy named Carl Llewellyn came up with this idea of law jobs. He had this great analogy. He said law's number one job is like being a garage mechanic. It does the garage repair work for society, fixing disputes, cleaning up messes. After that, it tries to prevent future breakdowns. And maybe most importantly, it decides who gets to be the mechanic in the first place. It's all about what the law does, not what it is. And a case like this one just drives the realist point home. It's a tragic story. A kid yells, "Let him have it, Chris," to his friend who has a gun. But what does that even mean? Does it mean shoot him? Or does it mean hand over the gun? The written law can't tell you. The real law was what the judge and jury decided it meant in that moment, in that messy, complicated human situation. For a realist, that's law. Now, this shift, this focus on fairness and what happens in the real world,
It actually paved the way for one of the most elegant and powerful thought experiments ever devised.
Okay, the philosopher John Rawls invites us to play a game. Imagine you get to be a founder of a brand new society. You and a bunch of other people get to sit around a table and write the Constitution, the basic rules for how everything will work. Sounds pretty good, right? But there's a huge catch. You have to do all this from behind what Rawls famously called the veil of ignorance.
And behind this veil, poof, everything about you is gone. You don't know if you're going to be born rich or poor. You don't know your gender, your race, your talents, your disabilities. You don't even know what you're passionate about. Every single thing that could make you design the rules to favor yourself is wiped clean.
So Rawls asks, if you have no idea what card you're going to be dealt in this new society, what kind of rules would you make? Well, you'd probably design a system that's as fair as humanly possible, right? Because, hey, you might end up as the person with the least power, the least luck. It's this incredible attempt to use pure logic to build a fundamentally moral society from the ground up. It feels like we're getting somewhere, doesn't it? A way to build a just society. But hold on. Because just when you think you've got it figured out, another group of thinkers shows up to pull the rug out from under the whole thing. And this quote really gets to the heart of it. The whole idea of the Enlightenment was to use reason and science to set us free. But what if that very same reason just ended up building a new kind of prison for us? This is the postmodern critique in a nutshell. It argues that any system of rules, doesn't matter if it's based on God or on pure logic like Rawls's experiment, it's not the truth. It's just a story, a point of view, a perspective that, for whatever reason, became the main one, and in doing so, probably pushed a lot of other perspectives to the side. And that, well, it brings us right back to the beginning, but with an even tougher challenge. If every set of rules, every legal system, is just one version of the story, with no claim to being the only true story, then how in the world do we ever agree on anything? How do we build a just society together? It's a heck of a question, and one to definitely keep chewing on.